good afternoon. So welcome to this science session as part of our Reform Week. I'm Elise Reece and I'm Head of Science at AQA. So what we'd like you to do first of all is to join the Slido so that you can ask any questions. We're going to drive all the questions through the Slido. Hopefully I'll address many of them during the presentation, but we will keep a copy of all the questions, and if I don't get around to answering any of them, we will create an FAQ document at the end and put that up with the presentation and also a recording of today's meeting, and that will go up onto the website next week sometime. So yeah, we really want you to engage obviously and ask questions so that you get the most out of the sessions today. Okay, so we're here as part of the Assessment Reform Week to talk you through everything you need to know at the moment about reform. And this is across this dedicated week. We're going to explore what these changes mean to your students and learners, the subjects is what we're going to do today, and also your centres. So far you will have already had an opportunity to see on Monday that there was a kick-off webinar looking at reform more generally and what it means to schools at a high level. There was also then a video podcast on what reform means in school, and that was done through a conversation with school leaders, so we could see what was affecting what they were thinking about. And then today, obviously, I'm going to be looking at science in particular and answering some of the key questions that people have already asked us, and also anything that you want to talk about as well. Tomorrow is all about the support that we will be able to give you. And then on Friday, we'll be part of the Festival of Education, and we're doing a live teacher panel there about assessment reform as well, which you can join in and listen to as well. Okay, so assessment reform. So what we thought we'd do at the start is just a quick poll. So there's the slide QR code there to go to the poll. So if you'd like to go to that. And what we're looking at is just really to see how you feel at the moment on a scale of 1 to 5. So I'm going to stop sharing this and go over to Phil, who's working in the background, looking at the Slido. And there we go. So yeah. Okay, so 1, I'm not confident at all. And 5, I'm very confident. So no surprises there, as I'm sure most people are feeling. That's why you're here. So what is going on? What can I expect? And hopefully by the end of this session, you will be feeling a bit more confident. Obviously, we're not going to be able to answer every single question because we ourselves don't know all the answers as yet. It's a long process that has started. But thank you for that. So if we go back to the screen now. There we go. Okay. Let me just move on from here. So that way. So as you know, the car was published quite a while ago. And on the right-hand side, you can see some of the key headlines that came from that. And some of these obviously affect science directly. So evolution, not revolution, which is good news to a certain extent, as this will help manage the change that teachers are going to have to go through. Nobody likes change. It's always quite stressful, and it always involves more work. And everybody is very conscious of the workload that teachers already have. So to reassure people, really, a lot of the resources and the lesson plannings that you already have will still be relevant. It will be very useful after reform. The knowledge that you've got of the assessment system, again, will be relevant. Ofqual are very clear that what is working, we want to keep, and that we're not changing things just for the sake of it. There's got to be a good reason for Ofqual to change the assessment side. Obviously, the actual subject content is a different matter, and we are looking for changes there. But please be reassured, we are looking at an evolution of things, not as it was in the last reform, where there was a really big change in what happened. Secondly, there is definitely a desire to reduce exam time overall for students, not necessarily for all subjects, but there's definitely this desire to reduce the average time that students are in exams and in the exam hall. This will be part of the consultation process, so you will be able to have a say in that. And I know there's lots of very strong feelings about length of time that these poor students having to spend in the exam hall. Third thing that was announced was about the triple science entitlement. And I will come back and talk about that in a bit more detail later on. I will address that of what we know about it later on. And then finally, there is a desire only to have NEA or coursework where it's necessary and where it's actually going to improve the assessment. So there's no strong need at the moment in science because we have 100% examination through the papers. The practical side seems to work very well on the question papers. So it's not something we are advocating and not something that Ofqual are particularly looking at in the science specifications and assessment model. So just to look at the little table at the side, at the moment, you might have heard or you might not have heard, because it was done quite quietly, there was an announcement by the DfE that the consultation on the subject content will be at some time in September. We haven't had a confirmed date, but we are already in July, so we are expecting it to be sort of late September. But that's what they've told us through the newsletter that they put out. And also really, really important, and I think schools really need to be aware of this, that there's not been a confirmed list of which subjects will be in phase 1. So there's going to be 2 phases for the GCSE and then later for the A level, which I'll show you a bit more detail later on. But they haven't actually said which subjects are going to sit in which phase. Obviously, by the consultation, there should be some indication there. But that's as much as we know at the moment on that. Okay, so I thought it would be quite useful to quickly go over the process of reform, who's involved and in what way, because I'm very conscious that a lot of teachers who are now teaching wouldn't have been part of the last reform, which I was, just come out of teaching when that all happened, so are not really aware of who does what, basically. So at very high level, the DfE write the subject criteria, and they use subject experts to do that. For science, these subject experts are the 3 learned societies: physics, chemistry, and biology. So they write this in collaboration, but also in their own way as well. The awarding bodies are consulted, and that's what we're doing at the moment. And then the final draft goes to for public consultation, as I've said, and we're looking, we think, about the end of September. After the consultation period, the DfE then published the final version. The awarding bodies use this document then to write the specification. So the specification does look different from the subject criteria, because obviously we have to add in the context around it. We have to indicate and show the depth that teachers are expected to go through. We do move things around so that they flow easier. So it is a bigger document than the actual subject criteria. However, those specifications then go through an accreditation process through the DFE to be signed off. And then teachers and centres have time to consider which awarding body they wish to use before first teaching starts. And the normal process is there's at least 1 year before actual first teaching when you get the accredited specification. So you should have a year to look at it. Ofqual write the assessment rules, if you like, which are called the subject level conditions. That's all about things like the AO balances, the percentage of maths, say, or practical work, if that's what they're going to do, whether there's extended response or not. So the whole, what the paper looks like comes from Ofqual. And then the awarding bodies then have to write sample assessment materials to show how we will apply these rules for each series. So you get an example paper, if you like, for each tier, if tiering is still there. And then that's used, those SAMs are used as part of the accreditation process. Then awarding bodies all produce further sample assessment materials that are published to centres to use as training for teachers and for students so that they become familiar with the exam structure and the types of questions before they actually sit the first series. We are expecting to produce, like we did in the last reform, a set of SAMs that can be used as a mock for your year 10s when that comes around. Because obviously questions are like gold dust at that point to know what their questions are like. But just remember, you know, we are talking about evolution, not revolution. I'll keep saying that's quite a nice phrase, but it is very truthful. Also, we then obviously produce other resources and training to support the greater understanding of the assessments and the teaching and exam prep. And then there's this body called JCQ, which when we get to exams and awarding, they ensure there's a common standard between exam boards and that not one exam board is easier than others. So there's a big meeting after awarding with all the different exam boards, Ofqual, etc., to make sure that is done. And they also do the exam timetable. That doesn't belong with the awarding bodies. Okay, so that's the sort of regulatory landscape. This is the timeline, which perhaps is what you really want to know about most, is what the timeline is as we know it. I mean, things do change, and I would definitely say this isn't set in stone, but it's certainly set as much as it can be. And I'm just going to move through 2 slides because this is an overview one. And then there's a bit more detail. So most important, bear in mind, we don't know who's phase 1 and phase 2, but you can see in the middle there that the expectation is that the first teach will be September 29 for the first phase of GCSEs, and then the first assessments would therefore be in 2031, and then the A-levels will be happening after those. They'll be rolling on behind them. So the students who do phase 1 will start their new A-levels in September 31 and sit them in summer 2033. Okay, so a bit more detail because this is important. This is what you want to be knowing about. So currently the awarding organisations are commenting on the draft subject content with the DFE, and we're also working with Ofqual on the assessment implications of those drafts. As we said, the final drafts will be published in September. We encourage all schools to respond to the consultation, have a good look at it. As assessment organisations, just one voice, we represent one voice, and you are many. We will be providing some materials, hopefully, to show what the differences are, because that will give you your first sort of indication of how much has changed, what's new, what's gone, and what has stayed the same and just been slightly tweaked. So we're hoping to do a comparison document based on the content document, the subject criteria document. Can't do it on the spec because we don't know what the new spec would look like, but there'll definitely be some support there. DFE then will obviously look at all those responses, and at some point in 27 they will publish the final version. Don't know when, because it depends on how much they want to process the consultation documents. Once they publish that, then obviously the accreditation process starts, and the awarding organisations begin to work through and turning those criteria, as I said, into a specification so that you can use that for your curriculum planning, etc. And as I've said, you get these sample assessment materials to show how we're going to assess that content. So the accreditation process does sort of go backwards and forwards because they have to check that the standards are covered properly and that we've covered every single point on the subject criteria. But as soon as we've got a decent draft, we will publish that for science, particularly because we know how quickly science teachers want to know what they're teaching, which I will come back to in a bit later, about the problems with the 3-year Key Stage 3, which it should be, and then the 2-year Key Stage 2. So I will talk about that in a bit more. At the same time, in 2027, they will also publish the new programme of study for Key Stage 1, 2 and 3. We aren't involved in the consultation on that at the moment because they don't consider that something that we need to be consulted on at this point. But obviously, we are very interested in it in order to allow that smooth progression from the different key stages into 4. We're assuming that there is not going to be anything about Key Stage 5 because Key Stage 5 will be driven by this subject content, and they're not doing consultation on the A-levels at the moment because they will follow on from the GCSEs, which is different from the last reform where the A-levels came first and then we were playing catch up. So it's much better this way, do the GCSEs and then the A-levels. There is this usual understanding that schools have the spec at least a year before first teach. So if science is in phase 1, you would be expecting to get final accredited specifications in September 28 so that you can have a look at them. You can then choose which specification you want to go with. And you can then, there'll be lots of events on and information and switching guides on the current to the new, and that teacher support as well around that. So that's a really busy year, is 2028 if we are in phase 1. Also at that same time, just to make everybody's life more difficult, you will start to be teaching the new Year 7 programme of study. So your new Year 7s in 28. So you will be running 2 versions of the programme of study with your Key Stage 3 students. Again, I don't think you need to worry about this at the moment until the drafts programme of studies are released. We don't know how much Key Stage 3 is going to change, whether it's a significant change or not. So I'm just going to flick back to this slide just to give you that feel. So if we're phase 1, we're looking for September 29. So that means that your current Year 7s, who will start in September, this new academic year, will be the ones that would be the cohort that do the new GCSEs and do the new assessments. So it's those students who are coming in September. They'll be the ones that are affected. Okay, so what does assessment reform therefore mean for science? What are we actually expecting? So what we know from the car is that there were 5 big things that were the takeaways. There is definitely a desire from all quarters to reduce and refresh the content. Science particularly important for the progression to A-level, so that's another key thing, but also the importance of building on Key Stage 3 and having a strong Key Stage 3 moving into Key Stage 4. Practical work is not going away, and they've really focused on that purposeful, that word purposeful. What does that mean? Time is very, very important and very short in curriculum time. So we want to make that practical work as purposeful and work as hard as possible for us. So there will be definite pressure on awarding bodies to make sure that the way we're assessing practical work is driving good practice in the classroom and good experiences for the students. And I would say moving away from this obsession with repeating methods and doing that rote learning. So I think that, there's a lot of scope in what we can do with practical work, and we're hoping to see some improvements in the scope of what is done for practicals. Strengthening climate change, definitely they've been talked about in a lot, so we're expecting that. And then again, this thing about triple science, which again I will talk about in a minute. There is the desire to increase the access onto triple science, because the DFE see that triple science is the route into A-level. I appreciate that that is not necessarily the case, because there's plenty of combined kids who go in and do A-levels, but they see that as a driver. They want more students doing A-levels in order to access those STEM careers. So there will be support around that access in that, but I will come back to that in a minute. So we have been running a series of teacher panels that some of you may have already been involved in, and we've been asking for your views to supplement our insight we've been gathering over the last few years, and we're using that to influence the drafters. So I thought it would be useful just to see a couple of things that people are saying. No surprises here. We think there is good, there is good progression to A-level, but only 3%, and I'm quite surprised it was even that high, of the 2,000 teachers that we spoke to felt that there was the correct volume. So that's a key thing that we are trying to influence on, is the volume of content. We keep going back to that. Practicals, yes, they are happening, perhaps not as often as you would like, but when we look at some of the challenges that you face, some of them are shown there. It really does reinforce that message to the drafters that curriculum time, as in the volume of content, not the space on the timetable, and this volume of content is the key issue. And our message both to Ofqual and the DFE is the need to be realistic solutions to practical work, and that realism is really important to me, having worked in schools. You've got to have technician capacity, and you've got to have the time in order to do practicals, because they do take a lot of time to do if they're going to be good. So we want to, we're really driving that home, that if we want to get more practical work and different kinds of practical work, we've got to reduce the volume. Do also want to say that, reform is not going to solve all the problems that we face in science. We're not going to get away from the problems of technician capacity, non-specialist teachers, lack of budget, but hopefully it will help solve some of the problems and have an impact to help some of the other challenges that teachers are facing. Clear message from teachers around NEA, and as I said earlier, Ofqual only want NEA if it's going to improve it. So basically, because of a real understanding of teacher workload that NEA brings with it, the fairness of it, especially in science where you need access to equipment, and it's got to be fair that everybody has the same sort of basic access to the equipment to do the practical work. And obviously the impact AI is having on any knowing whether any work is a student's work or somebody else's work at lots of different levels in education, not just at GCSEs. So our message is very much, schools seem to like our current system, but working scientifically, the apparatus and techniques and the required practicals that are used to assess those apparatus and techniques could be improved. And we are currently doing a survey you might have seen, and I will put the link into this slide later, asking you which required practicals do you like and which ones you don't. I have a strong feeling that I know that some of them are not very good, and there's things that we can do to improve those. So if that is retained, then there is definitely some area we can work on in that. There's definitely an agreement that climate change sustainability is relevant. Teachers want to are keen to increase its coverage in science, but there are some barriers which teachers are facing. Obviously, confidence in teaching material that we're not used to teaching and might not actually know the science behind it. The quality of resources that are actually out there, lots of them have got misconceptions in them and are not appropriate. And another one we were talking about at a conference we hosted was with the Royal Met, which was about the sequencing of how you teach the climate change, if it's going to be in all three sciences. So which bits need to come first, a bit like maths, and where you can build on it. So we are working really closely with the Royal Meteorological Society and the Geographical Society on those issues, and we will have some more information and support as we go on, and we know what actually is going to be in the final content around curriculum. So we've done some frequently asked questions already at various panels, and I just wanted to share a few of those and answer some of those high level ones before we go into your questions. But obviously, the biggest question is, that I think everybody can understand and relate to, is that teachers are struggling with the content, with the time, and how is that going to be addressed by the DFE? And that is, we're doing our part to try and influence that, but we really do need teachers to engage with the consultation and have your say around this, because it is really important that you are happy with the content that's there. So please do get involved in that consultation. There'll be lots of signposting to it when it does come out, and we will continue to try and influence in that space as well. This is one that is often more important for science, because we know that the content, lots of schools teach a 3-year Key Stage 4 and start at different times in Year 9. The DFE regard GCSEs as a 2-year course. They don't see this as changing, and they're not going to change that. The aim is that obviously if we reduce the content, then you would be able to deliver the new programme of study within the designated time that you need without teaching early. However, we're very aware that not all teachers would agree with this, and that actually you do want to. So, like I say, as soon as we have a decent draft spec, like we did at the last reform, we will publish it so that you can see what is the content, and what, if you wanted to start teaching in 2028, if we are phase 1. So that you've got enough time, or you feel that you've got enough time to do that. So, just to say that the DFE do consider it as a 2-year course, and that's not going to change. Okay, triple science. Okay, so the triple entitlement, the DFE have softened the wording from the CAR and have now said that it's pupils who can benefit from it. So they do, as I say, want to encourage the uptake, but they do realise that not every school is able to offer this to all students for many good reasons. But they are committed to understanding what those barriers are and to try and support the development of that offer. So it really is sort of watch this space. They've not said very much about it since they announced it. They've not said, anything particular to us about it beyond the fact that they do want to encourage it. They are aware of the issues that we all know about, and we have explained to them that there's only 9% of centres with AQA, and that's 78% in the country, don't offer both pathways, and therefore very good reasons that they don't do that. There was a trend last year for more school centres to go over to combined, and we did see a shift in that, but that's not necessarily happened this summer, and it seems quite stable. So really it is, like I say, to watch this space about those two pathways on that. And again, how will practical work be considered in the new curriculum, given the challenges that schools face? The DfE have definitely emphasised, as I've said, the importance of high quality practical science, and they will clarify what they mean by its purpose, and also clarify what the expectations will be of that, whether there will be changes in those expectations in the draft content. So it's not very long to wait until we know a bit more substantial details about what practical work will look like. Our aim is to make sure that the practical offer we have is realistic and, as I say, is deliverable within typical school context, and is driving good practice and encouraging rather than assessing particular types of pedagogy. And to me, that's pedagogy is for teaching and learning. Assessment is what we can assess on an exam paper. And there's different things you can do good pedagogy, but you don't necessarily want to assess everything that you, every practice, if you like, that you teach. So that's about that. So just before we go on to your questions, I just wanted to just talk a little bit about the rest of the support that we will be offering during form. So we will be providing all the information that we can. So this will be on the Assessment Reform Hub. So there's a dedicated page, and all the webinars, latest updates will be on there. So like this presentation and the recording once it's done, and the FAQs, so that you can find everything in one place. And there'll be a link to that page as well from the subject pages shortly. Then you might remember back in the day before COVID, we used to have hub meetings, which were face-to-face, regional, local meetings for teachers. We've trialled a few of these this summer in these centres here in Green, and they've been very successful. So we're hoping to expand that and do some more. But we also obviously have our virtual communities online, because obviously not everybody can get out to a meeting after school. In the autumn term, we will be having our normal Curriculum Connects, looking at the summer series and feedback on that. So those dates are the provisional dates. And again, there'll be, I'm sure, some news updates in those meetings, because there might be things by October, we can say, but also we will put on more of those as and when we need to. So they're a useful vehicle for teachers to attend those meetings. And obviously the A-level Exploring the Summer are also being put on. As we say, A-level will be behind the GCSEs, but we're very keen to start gathering some more insight on what schools like about our A-levels, what you don't like about our A-levels, what are the pain points, what you think about progression. So do look out for opportunities to get involved in that, because they will be reformed just a bit later. If you're looking to find any of these courses, then the link is through the professional development page, which you can click on and find there. And then also we have our science termly newsletter, which gives you sort of brief updates on that, and also our Free at 3, where you can book a course, book a talk with one of our subject support advisors, and you can talk to them through any questions that you've got. Okay, now I'm very aware I've talked a lot and said a lot. Like I say, this presentation will be available, but we are going to go to the questions now that hopefully people have posted, and Phil can let me see if I can get it to work. So stop sharing. No. It's all disappeared. Sorry, Phil. I'm just gonna, I think I'll just have to end the slideshow, Phil, and then reopen it.
Yeah, no problem. I've got the Slido sharing for you to look at when it's done.
Right, so should I reshare my PowerPoint, or I can see the screen?
If you could just come into the Teams meeting, Elise. I'm assuming that you're still on your PowerPoint, and you should see a Slido being shared.
Yeah, I can see that on my screen. So let me share my screen again. Sorry, folks. Okay.
Would you just do me a favour, Elise, and stop sharing?
Stop sharing.
Yeah, and I will share in your place. No, it's absolutely fine. Yeah, I'm just going to share mine. All right, I've done that wrong. There we go. Right, sorry about that, people. Okay, full equation sheets still in physics, question mark. Okay, situation with the equation sheets is that the current one, as you probably know, is going to be provided until the reform one starts. Whether we still have a full equation sheet will be part of that consultation when the draft comes out. So I can't say at the moment whether there will or there won't be, but it will be part of the consultation. So please do make your feelings known. I think the general feeling is that, that there should be, even the Institute of Physics have said that. So we will wait and see, though. I can't confirm or not at this stage, unfortunately. So we start teaching some of the GCSE content in Year 9. Yeah. Will we get the finished changes and the documentation through for us to have a year before? The hope is that you will have the accredited spec a year before. So you would be able to start teaching in September, but it just depends on the accreditation process. But you will definitely have a draft good enough, if you like, version like you had last time. You'll know what the assessment model, how that's changed as well. So yes, I would say if you want to start teaching in Year 9, you feel that you need to, you will have enough there to get going with it. I don't know if many schools actually start in September in Year 9. The ones that lots of them I've spoken to, it's more sort of January time or later. So yeah. Tier of entries at science will still be the same. Yet there's still the desire to keep tiers of entry. Ofqual don't see the importance of keeping them because of the amount of content that we have to cover, and the exam experience is really important. So yeah, I would say tiers are here to stay. When will we hear what topics are being added and removed? Well, that will be in the draft subject criteria in September, but it won't look like a spec, but you will be able to see broadly what has been added and removed. So you won't see
in a specification look, if you like, until we get a draft spec written. But we'll definitely try and make it a bit more meaningful, the actual subject content draft review. Will there be considering equations given on an equation sheet for chemistry? I would say that's unlikely, because we don't have one now, and Ofqual aren't particularly keen on introducing more sort of prompts like equation sheets. However, there may be changes in the rules in that we can put the equation into the question like we do in some of the physics ones, so that you don't have to actually learn them. Because I know in the past, in the legacy, I used to teach that there we did have some there, but there's not been any discussions about that. Okay, so we've talked about that one. Is a single award integrated science like Wales under consideration? No, that isn't under consideration. There's the strong belief that every student should at least do double science or combined science, or the triple. So there'll still be foundation level, but not, as you say, this sort of single award integrated one. So no. Applied science, there will be maybe in the future some sort of vocational GCSE science, but in the offer at the moment, it is basically just what we've got at the moment, combined science and triple. So again, things to raise at the consultation, I would definitely say. Will exam boards, JC communities, is there an expectation that all the content can be delivered in 2 years? Yes, that would be the expectation, that you should be able to deliver the content and the skills within 2 years. I know that's always tough, because obviously it's not 2 years, because you have assessments thrown in as well. Will the exam boards, JC, communicate better about the content shared across subjects? This is a very good point, and something we are very aware of about the maths, science and geography. So we, AQA, we will be looking at how we can improve this by signposting, either in the specifications, and also when we're writing the specifications, we will be working closely with our colleagues in maths, particularly in geography, about the climate change, even though not all students do geography. But I think that will come from the exam boards rather than Ofqual or the DFE. So yeah, look out for that. Guided learning hours, they are the same, 120 to 140. But to be honest, what is a guiding learning hour? Because it depends on your students, doesn't it? Whether what your students are like. So although it's a rough, doesn't really, I don't think, having taught myself, that it's very helpful particularly. I suppose it is for curriculum time, actually. So when you're doing your timetabling, yes, and they are the same. So if you're trying to get more science time, because I know lots of schools do cut the amount of time available. Practicals, if they're going to be required practicals, new equipment may be needed to be purchased. We are very aware about budgets, and we wouldn't be looking to have new kind of equipment that you don't normally have. I think there's very much a realization we need to be realistic with budgets and provide practicals that you can do with your normal equipment and glassware that you've got. Phil, I'm really conscious of the time. It's nearly 1:45. So all these other questions I will have a look at, and we will create a FAQ on them. Just go back to this. Go. So please, rest assured, all those questions will be addressed, because that's really important to us. So just very quickly, it would be great if we could go to this last quick poll. If you could do that QR code, which is really just to see whether you feel a bit more informed than you were at the beginning. Yeah, so if we could put that up. done the right thing here. So yeah, here we go. So if you could fill that in, it would just be good to get a temperature check whether you feel a bit better than you were. Well, that's good. We've moved from the zero, from not confident at all, more into in the middle, which, yeah, I wouldn't expect many people feel very confident because there's a lot of unknowns, but that's really promising to see that you feel better informed. And like I say, there will be more of these. I think there was a second question as well. Bill, if you want to just share that second question. Yeah. Okay. So I've listened to teachers like you. So that's good that most of you feel we are listening. I mean, we are trying to. And we try to get out to as many schools as possible with our subject support team. So please do use those opportunities to talk to them if you want, and to look at what events we go to. We go to lots. If there's a regional network that STEM are doing, or something like somebody like that, one of your local, the old SLPs I know have gone. But yeah, we do try and get out there as much as possible. Okay, right. I'm going to just go back to the finish because oops, going to the wrong bit. Appreciate that you've, sorry, I'm going to the wrong bit then. Let's see, share again. Some personnel. Here we go. Right. Okay. So I think it's just to say, you know, thank you very much for coming, and there is our web address there if you want to get in touch with us, and the phone number. Those were just a couple of useful links that you might find. We didn't really talk about performance measures, but if you're interested in that, there's a link to that. And to say thank you very much for coming. Like I say, the materials will be on the website sometime next week, and I will definitely have a look at all those questions and try and answer them as quickly as possible. So yeah, thank you for your time, and I hope you've found it useful.